So, the title of today's shortage series is Getting Results This Year as a School Psychologist. So, I am pleased to introduce our speaker today. Chris Ponce is a practicing school psychologist based out of San Antonio, Texas. He has worked in a variety of settings across all levels of children's education. He has special interests in the clinical development of school psychologists to help them reach their full potential and in holistic educational consultation with school staff and parents. He has served as a board member of TASP, and he is currently pursuing his doctorate at Texas Tech University in all of his spare time. He has a passion for supporting and assisting school districts that are underserved and or remotely rural. His current research relates to systems of support for rural school psychologists. In his free time, Chris loves hanging out with his wife and his two sons. He has a few keen interests outside of family and school psychology. He is an avid cinephile. I will admit I had to Google that word. He's a rabid board game player, and he's a lifelong Kansas City Chiefs fan. A final obsession that brings together all of his areas of interest is fantasy football. Chris also hosts the TASP Talks podcast with Brooke Roberts and Kia Sala. So if you have not tuned into that, please do. They work really hard and have a lot of great info. So thanks, Chris, for being with us today and sharing some of the practices that you have found useful with our audience. We appreciate you.
Of course. And real quick before I move to the next slide.
Yeah.
So that's me on the left. I didn't pay those people. My family is just ridiculously good looking. I don't know how I lucked out and got them, but that's my wife. I've been married for 11 years, and my two boys, one is 4, one is 6 months. There wasn't a gap between 4 and 6 months. That's just their ages. I am entering my 9th year as a school psychologist. I've been in the same district for 8 years now, so that's been really crucial to a lot of the things we're going to talk about. And when we kind of go through these are things that I've just learned over the years that work well for me. And so the biggest thing is not necessarily even replicating it, but being able to maybe encourage you to define and create your own type of thing for the beginning of the school year, right? And when we go through a lot of these things, I think the biggest thing to kind of think about too is if you get on a campus where you guys work incredibly well as a team, a lot of these things become a lot easier, right? When there's turmoil and there's conflict on a campus, it makes things very difficult for you because you're putting out we already got to put out way too many damn fires as it is, but now you're having to do like extra fires you got to deal with, right? Because now you're dealing with social conflict and things like that. So just kind of keep that as a mindset whenever we go through these things. Sorry, Elise.
No, awesome. Thanks for sharing that. We had a chat box that said the sound is a little weird. It's kind of going in and out, but I'll let you know if we continue to have issues. I can hear you. It's just a little fuzzy. So just so you know, not to like increase your nerves or anything at all. So
I'll yell going forward.
So before we get started, not to spend a lot of time on this, but I guess can you kind of provide some context and tell people a little bit about your role as a school psychologist, kind of what life is like as a school psychologist in Judson ISD?
Yeah, so in our in our district, we take a whole holistic approach to the entire spectrum of our services. We are not just assessors. We don't just, do testing or anything like that. The role and the key for us is that we have our campuses and we run those campuses, right? So I do evaluations, I do counseling, I do consultation, I provide support to teachers, I'm sitting in R's and things like that. Now, because of that, having to utilize and prioritize your time is incredibly necessary because it's very easy to get off track, right? I mean, you guys have all been on campuses before, that's very easy to get distracted and just talk to people for minutes upon hours maybe, and that's something that I sometimes struggle with because I'm a talker. So if you come to my office and start talking and you see me slowly close my laptop, it's like, okay, you've engaged me completely, this might be an issue. So having to be able to prioritize your time is very necessary, is super needed on our campuses here. Now, because we deal with the entire spectrum on our campuses, we kind of have to have a key in everything. We have to have a decent knowledge base and foundation, all the different things that we're working with, because we're also doing like dyslexia assessments too. We have dyslexia therapists provide the services, but that's something we have to take care of as well. And then on top of all the reads, and remember 3 years ago was pandemic. So we're having to deal with those 3-year reevaluations coming through too now. So this year and last year, we're probably both going to be a little bit chaotic, but I mean, that's kind of also the job we signed up for too. So anything I didn't touch on, Elise, you want me to kind of?
No, I just wanted people to kind of know where you were and kind of what the role looks like. Because obviously around the state, it looks a little bit different, but it sounds like y'all are doing your best to kind of provide that comprehensive model, and you have your hands in lots of different things.
I think that's key because, right, I live in a metropolitan city, right? So because I live in a city, we do have more school sites in the district than a lot of other places, right? And we're even a large district in San Antonio. We're probably a medium level district. But when you kind of start expanding out to some of these, I have 2 campuses, Megan. Thank you for asking. But yeah, so like when you start expanding out to these other areas that are more rural in nature, you start to notice they may only do the psychological part. I'm not saying everybody does, but once I talk to, they're like, oh, we do the psychological part. And then they do all the other things too, but they'll have diagnosticians who take care of, more of the academic assessments and cognitive achievement and things like that. But that's because there's a lack of availability of school psychs. It's almost like there's a shortage or something going on. So, that's, something that's definitely playing a part in it. And it makes how they practice school psychology totally different than how I approach it. All right. Because their focus is on very specific parts of an evaluation, where mine is I have to do everything. And that's not saying one is better or one is worse. That is just the need or the accessibility of school psychs in your area.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So when you're thinking about, I know we had talked about, a lot of it is planning, right? Like we're at this pivotal time of the year where I know some schools are getting ready to start next week, maybe the week after. So when you're thinking about all of these roles and kind of hands that you have, let's talk a little bit about some guiding themes that you kind of use in your work. And I know that we're going to kind of dig into some of those too.
Yeah. So these 3 things are almost kind of the pillars of my beginning of the year: proactive planning, effective communication, and then what is my why, right? It's a commitment to supporting students and the community. Planning is essential. Like you can't just wing it and go into the year because it's chaotic, right? You're going to have all these transfer kids coming in. You have your 3-year reevaluations that are going to sneak up on you, not to mention the initials that you started last year and are now continuing into this year, or the initials that started somewhere else last year are now continuing and you're taking up, because they're not going to come from the other district to come and take care of that. So being able to just kind of build in that time on top of PD and kids that are new, teachers that are new, don't know you. And I even talked about if you're new to your campus as well. So if you're new to your campus, that's now thrown in a completely different type of variable that I don't have to necessarily deal with, right? Because I'm coming back to my same campuses this year. And if you're new to the field, you're also trying to learn how to do the damn job, which is a whole nother facet that you're trying to figure out. And hopefully you have a great supervisor or a great mentor who's there to kind of help guide you in that process. But if you're in some of these areas where you may be the only school psychologist or the only one in your surrounding area, you kind of have to kind of figure that out on the fly. I'm sorry, because that sucks. That really does. But on the flip side, you're there. So how are we going to kind of start working through that process to make it so you're successful in the beginning of the year?
Yeah.
Communication is super big for me too, right? Like talking. I don't just sit in my office all day. I'm very much trying to be out there on the campus so people know. So they don't just say like, I know that's the school psychologist, right? Or is it, I want them to say that's Chris, or that's Mr. Ponce, or Mr. Chris, or whatever they're going to call me. But also so that way they feel comfortable coming up and having a conversation with me. Now that is a double-edged sword, right? Because they feel comfortable talking to me, but they also feel comfortable coming up and talking to me. So there are many times where like, oh, Chris, could you just come look at this kid in this classroom? Or I have a question on this kid. And it goes back to you have to start going back to your morals and the process that we go through whenever we do our job. Have there been interventions done, all that type of stuff. But then that's when consultation becomes a huge part of your job, right? How are we going to help guide the teacher or this educator or this principal or whoever into helping out these students so that we're not jumping to conclusions and assuming every kid who has difficulty in the first week of school needs to be tested, And that's kind of a tangent, but that's where I went to with that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's great. And we'll talk about this too, I sometimes hear school psychs say things like, I don't really have time to, get out there and talk to teachers. But what I hear you saying is sometimes putting in that effort on the front end can maybe reduce some of the problems that you might experience on the back end.
Absolutely. It's that short-term type of effort that you're putting in, which hopefully, I'm saying hopefully, right? And these are all like pie in the sky, best case scenario type of things. There's long-term results that'll help you down the road, right? So if I'm putting in the time with Dr. Hendricker now, hopefully down the road, she may even know what my answer is before coming to me. So that may eliminate a conversation that we're going to have. Or she feels more comfortable in a difficult situation like, Chris, I just need your help with this situation. And now she trusts me. There's a trust that's been built between us that was created at the beginning of the school year or even throughout the whole school year. And that's kind of what I mean by effective communication, is being able to have these conversations and having good soft skills, being able to disagree with somebody in a very effective way, being able to see both sides of what people are saying and understanding that even though I'm recommending, we're just going to do a behavior intervention, right? If I'm going to recommend a behavior intervention, it's very easy for me to say that, knowing that the teacher is going to go back to the room and do it, and I'm going back to my office with no kids. All right. So just understanding, having that mindset when you're talking to people that, yes, I'm recommending something to you that I know can work if you do it effectively, but also you're going to be doing it with 20 plus kids in the classroom. Right. And I may come and check up on you every once in a while because I can't sit there all day because, like we talked about, we are busy people, but just having that mindset when we recommend it. So just, kind of ease it in there, help them out a little bit if that needs to be done,
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And then your last point before we jump into some specifics is commitment. I think that is a big one, especially on those days where it's hard, right? I mean, when you're just like, I'm spinning my wheels, I'm writing reports, what am I doing? So that definitely resonates with me.
The what am I doing comes up a lot. Like, what are we doing here? Are we just testing kids and putting them in a system to hopefully catch them up and move them out? Or are we trying to effectively help a child get through their education in a progressive way, right? So just remember, and we're going to get to it later, but just knowing your why. Like, why are we here? Help these children, but it's also the community part too, like parents need help. They don't understand what we know. This comes up a lot every year where a parent has difficulty maybe accepting a disability that their child is being recommended for, right? Typically it's autism or something like that. And for us at the education side, we're very much like, well, like clearly look at them, right? Look at this child, like your child needs help and they're having a hard time with that. But now like kind of put yourself in their shoes, right? They don't live in our world. They don't live in the special education world where they're testing, hundreds of kids every single couple years or every single year, hopefully not. So they may need a little bit of help in bridging and kind of scaffolding into where we're trying to help their child. So having that conversation, that difficult conversation with a parent is crucial to kind of like helping them understand that, yes, I understand we're talking about a disability or an eligibility, however you want to say it. But knowing that we have that information, we can now help your child who is not necessarily always learning at a deficit, just learning differently, right? And how can we kind of frame that child's education to be effective to them? Instead of just saying, your kid's on the autism spectrum, here's special education services, I'm moving on to the next kid.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of commitment, right?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I know I've heard, obviously I'm more on the training side, but I hear a lot of people say because there is a shortage and they feel really stretched, that I think a lot of those soft skills that you've really highlighted is kind of like this umbrella that we should be operating under, right? The umbrella and those soft skills are what are the easiest things to go sometimes, like it's easy to say, like, I don't have time to have that conversation. I don't have time to sit down with this parent, but using that as kind of a guiding framework to make sure that we are effective in our job, I think is really important.
I think it also should be noted, just context, like I'm not just doing like 40 evaluations a year either, right? It's not like I have all the time in the world to do all these things. It's just prioritizing your time and putting in that it's almost like a hierarchy of like what needs to be done right now and just scheduling out your day kind of a thing, but just knowing that these little things, they add up in a positive way down the road, right? It makes for it maybe a less difficult ARD in a couple of weeks when you actually have to have that initial ARD. But if you have that parent interp 2 weeks earlier, So that way they had time to digest the information, and then you just do a quick checkup call the week before, maybe a couple of days before, just checking in to make sure they don't have any other questions. That phone conversation might be less than 3 minutes long, right? Like, Dr. Hendricker, do you have any questions about anything we talked about a couple of weeks ago? You may have one question, I answer it. Besides that, you're good to go. I'll see you at the yard. How you doing? Keep it moving, right? Like, it helps with the whole process,
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I know that when we were kind of talking and planning this presentation, you picked up on key things that have helped you over the years get results, do your job well. And so we kind of came up with this fun acronym, because who doesn't love an acronym, right? In school psych. So do you want to kind of give an overview, or do you want to kind of just jump right in to start?
We'll jump right in, but let me just go over each of them real quick. So it's how to get results, right? And I have to give credit to Dr. Hendricker, who put them all together to make this beautiful acronym. So it's fantastic, because mine was just a jumble of ideas. But reviewing your job responsibilities, evaluating systems and data, set professional goals, utilize time and space, link up with staff, think about what's new, like policies or regulations, and then save space for you. And we'll kind of go over what each of these means. Some of these are more fact-based, some of these are more like kind of you make of it what you will kind of stuff. So
yeah, no, great. All right, so let's jump into the R, reviewing your responsibilities. Obviously, we have a lot of those, right? So talk to us about how you start off your year and getting kind of some of your responsibilities in order.
So I know we all want to do everything that a school site can do, right? I know that's just our pie in the sky thing. But we also have to understand that when we get employed by a district, there are certain job responsibilities that are required of us, right? And I think that's the first and foremost thing. Even if you come back and you've been at the same district before, stuff happens during the summer that may update. So don't just assume it's going to be the same thing. So first and foremost, just quickly familiarize yourself with your district's policies and procedures. If you're new to a district, even if you're a veteran or you're brand new to the field, I think that's very important, because you don't actually always know what you're supposed to be doing, and there's been a lot of people that maybe have gone in the middle of the year before after the school year started, because typically in the beginning of the school year, we have all those PDs where all the school psychs meet together and, kind of go over the new policies. But if you start like September or October, sometimes you just kind of get thrown into the school. And so you just kind of have to figure it out on the fly. But if you can get a point or get a handbook or something that at least reviews what your job responsibilities are, I think that's super efficient. It helps just at least set the groundwork for the rest of the year for you. Also check up and see if there's any updated policies related to student services, or any type of confidentiality, assessment, intervention, paperwork. I just thought about that paperwork. So like this new year, there's a new thing going through. That certain paperwork has to be turned into the district office before, once you get it, right? So little things like that help add up so you don't get emails from people. Chris, have you turned this in? Chris, I need this. Chris, can you scan and email this to me? So that's those little things. That's time you have to take out of your day to run down to the scanner, scan it to yourself, and then email it off to somebody, Try to remember what you do again, especially if you don't work during the summer, right? So there's a bit of a transitionary period when you get back to the new school year where you're like, all right, what do I do? And I think I work all year and I still have that issue. When I come back, because now the kids are here, now teachers are asking questions, admin's asking questions, and I'm like, that's right. I am an adult who has a job, and so I have to figure out what I do again for a living. And then finally, most districts make updates during the summer. Eric and I touched on that. That happens a lot during the summer. That's when policies are going to be updated, procedures can be updated, paperwork. There may be differences to your consent paperwork or something like that, or procedures that need to be done in order for things to happen. Just get those updated information. And the other thing is learn how to ask questions. Like that's okay to ask questions. If you have a point or a mentor, again, or a director, because everybody, depending on where you are, you talk to different people. In our district, we talk to each other, all the school psychs. There's a lot of us. But if I was dealing with school psych, my only point of contact might be the SPED director. So trying to get a hold of them and asking them questions, but knowing how to effectively ask questions so that way you can get the information that you need. Again, it all just comes back to knowing what you're supposed to be doing. That way you're not in some fugue state in October when October counts around the corner and you're trying to figure out what am I supposed to do in this situation. You already know the procedure.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And everybody's going to have a system that works best for them, in terms of like new paperwork and how do I remind myself what policies are and where to pull paperwork from. So everybody's going to find their own groove. But I think that that's a good point there is this time that we need to kind of reorient ourselves before we're able to jump right in.
Something I struggle with every year that I have to continuously go back and remember is like the little things like SHARs billing. Like we have to bill SHARs in our district. And that's something that I don't have difficulty doing it. I just have to continuously remind myself of that. So like even this past year, I've just set up a date. Here's when it's going to happen. Just go through, do all your SHARs billing. But that is part of your job. Like that is part of my job responsibility. That is something I am required to do every single year. So making sure that I do that, again, makes it so long-term questions I have to deal with in May aren't going to happen because I've already kind of done that up until that point.
Yeah. And I heard you say put it in your calendar, like that's part of your job. So I'm a big calendar person. I'm like, that's an appointment to myself, right? And I mean, it's kind of like if that's your time to do SHARs billing or your time to review a certain policy, like put that in your calendar as like protected time, right? So that it's not something that can just be pushed off, forgotten, done later.
Absolutely.
All right, let's talk about the E. The E is probably my favorite. If I have any students on the call, they would probably vouch for this. So talk to us about evaluating systems and data.
So initially, I'm sure when you see evaluating data, you're probably thinking, like testing data, but it's not always that. Sometimes it's your campus or your district data, right? So look at the previous year's stuff, examine it from the previous school year, including maybe how many assessments were done, evaluations that were asked or requested, intervention plans that maybe are changing or were effective last year. And that could be something like we use like the Spire program on one of my campuses, which was very effective. So we're going to continue it this year as a reading program. So knowing and understanding that, I kind of have a good idea maybe where some of my kids are coming from as far as what they've been receiving as an intervention in RTI or MTSS. If you're able to, try to look for any trends, right? Areas of concern, patterns that may guide you this upcoming year. Things I've kind of thought about is like, how many kids did I test last year? Was that more than the previous year? Was it less? Was there the ratio was off between reads and initials? Is there a very specific eligibility or concern that I had a high number of testing in last year? Last year, we opened up our campuses to pre-K3 and pre-K4 kids on each campus. So I had a very high number of early childhood evaluations. That's not going to be necessarily the same thing this year because there's less kids. So, but just going back and looking at it, it's an outlier year where I tested way too many 3-year-olds and way too many 4-year-olds that would typically go through another thing. But having that mindset and knowing that, I can enter this year knowing that's going to be something I don't necessarily have to do as much. So I can focus my attention on other things and less time on classroom management and like a pre-K3 or pre-K4 classroom, Mm-hmm. Is there a new makeup for your school, right? Like, so one of my campuses, we're going through a principal transition. The old one retired. We have a new one coming in who's going to start implementing new things on that campus, right? So just knowing that, you're going to have to see there might be a new procedure for getting referrals from your RTI team. There might be more different expectations from that principal as far as how it affects the SPED side of things. So things like maybe they want to be kept in the know on things. Maybe they want to come to every single staffing, things like that. So just knowing that that's a system thing, that's an institutional thing on your campus, it kind of helps you prepare for the new school year. And then if you're new to a campus and you're able to, maybe talk to whoever had the campus last year. Get some insight into why either they left or why they were moved, or kind of the dynamics of that campus, because that helps you prepare. We're all psychologists or future psychologists, kind of understanding and knowing the culture of a campus is very important for being successful on that campus,
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I was even thinking about this too, that, some of that data can really help you figure out how to do your job more effectively, like you said. And I think one thing that we struggle with, especially here in Texas, we might have some non-Texas folk on the call, but, I hear a lot of people saying, I just test all the time. Like I do so many evaluations, I do so much report writing. And so even an easy thing that I tell my students is like, look at how many D and Qs you had last year, and like, think about that, right? Like if you had, there's a lot of data out there, conversations, and every evaluation is different, but there's data out there that says maybe an evaluation takes you 12 to 14 hours to do. So if you had 10, even 10 D and Qs, that's 120 hours that you spent, right? And maybe you did gain some good knowledge about the kid, and things that can help in that process. But even having conversations like that about where could that have 120 hours have been spent, right? Like it could have been spent going into those pre-K3 classrooms and helping with social skills, helping with classroom management. So I think there is a lot of value in looking at that kind of systems level data to help us do our job more effectively.
I think you bring up something important, Elise, that I just thought about too. If you go back and look at maybe like D&Qs or parent requests or things like that, those extra types of things, you can kind of see if you had a high amount last year and maybe a lot of those parent requests became D&Qs, like how can we change the system to be better efficient this year? And if you had a lot of D&Qs last year, why did you have so many D&Qs? Was it for referrals? Was it parent requests? Was it maybe from one very specific individual who kept referring their kids and they all D&Q'd for some reason? So then we can actually go in and almost like see like, all right, here's a very specific thing that we can work on this year. And it does tie into our next thing too, but like, this is a goal we can work on, right? So if we have parent requests, what is the current system and is it working, right? And it's not to say that every parent request is a bad request, right? That is not a thing. But if you have a high amount of D&Qs that are coming from parent requests, maybe that should be something that's looked at, and you can even utilize that to your advantage when advocating for yourself, right? So if Elise was my principal or my administrator on my campus, I could say like, I know we kind of just test every kid who parent requests one, but if we look at it, out of the 12 that I tested, 6 of them D&Q'd, and that's kind of it's a 50-50 thing. So is there a better system we can use so that way you can utilize me better on this campus going forward, and then just use the numbers Alicia said, right? 10 hours, that's 60 hours you could have used me for something else. Or that could have been 6 other kids I tested this year that actually needed those referrals or that testing to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big systems person, so I love that.
All
right, you alluded to setting goals. So talk to us a little bit about even how you do that and how you kind of reflect on where you need to work and improve.
So just over time, I've noticed just things that I'm weak at, right? Or things that I feel like I need to be better at. So it's not even necessarily a weakness of mine, but a few years ago, before pandemic, before 2020, I thought something I wasn't great at that I should have been better at was talking with parents and parent interpretation. I have no problem admitting it was very clear cut when I would do interpretations, especially academically. I would say the scores and how they qualified. But just kind of as I went on, and I think it really happened when I had a kid, I'm going to be completely honest with you, where I was like, all right, if somebody just told me these scores, these don't mean anything to me. So what I did is start working on my interpretation skills and kind of helping a parent really understand what their scores meant. That was a goal that I wanted to focus on going forward, right? It was an idea that I needed to work on something very specific so that way I could become more efficient at my job. Because what ended up happening was I would do the interpretation, and then when we had the initial art, I would have to do the interpretation again because they didn't quite get it. So now I'm having to do it twice, and I'm taking time away. So doing more work on the front end at that first parent interpretation and then going to the initial, that when I asked, did you have any questions on anything we talked about? Nope, you did. You explained it well. I'm fine. I'm good to go. Let's just move on. I've now cut time down on an art. That's like a personal goal that I worked on, but just kind of figure out what yours is, maybe it's learning a new assessment. Maybe it's not even school psych related, but maybe I want to be more of a face on campus. Maybe I want to be more involved with things. I work at elementary schools, so I try to be involved with, especially in the beginning of the year, I'm trying to help out with like the beginning of the year before school starts, where the kids go, getting them to classrooms, things like that. But again, that's now putting me as a face in the school. So I'm being more visible. I'm somebody that they recognize. I don't know necessarily what you do, but I know you helped my kid get to class when he was crying every single day, the first week of school. So I'm building relationships. So it's always a ripple effect whenever you do these things. It may just become more organized. I'm new in a new system this year based off a colleague in my district who showed me how to use an Excel worksheet to, track the kids that I'm assessing every single year. And that's something I think is going to get a lot easier for me to do because it's very efficient. It's on my computer instead of me, dragging around like a piece of paper or something like that. Really be humble with yourself and figure out where you're weak, right? Just where you have a weakness at. Whether it is something like one of those tangible skills, or not tangible skills, one of those, like those factors that are like talking to people, just having a conversation, being efficient in an art, maybe you talk too much in arts and you need to kind of dial it back a little bit. Going into classrooms, and if there's issues with classroom management, or if they just like, I need help with this whole situation, I don't know how to get the kids to listen. If that's something you want to work on too, do that as well. And then how are you going to reach those goals? It's just studying, research, going to webinars, going to workshops, going to conferences, utilizing the other school psychs or other professionals in your district who may be great at these things. Like, at least I'm just having such a hard time with these people are asking about classroom management. I don't know what to do. I know you talked about how you do it on your campus. Can you kind of give me some pointers or kind of give me a heads up on what is efficient or what works on your campus? But now you're building a relationship with somebody else too. And then also, I think if we go back to the reaching, like the workshops and the conferences, something you can go to in person if you're able to. I think that's really nice because you get to network with other people and you get to kind of see other people's perspectives on maybe some of the same problems that you're having, which I've learned a lot in the past few years, being part of the TASP board and just going to conferences. I feel like that's when I've made the most growth because I get to see other people's perspectives instead of just relying on what I think needs to be done or what I think is the most efficient way of doing something.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And then to quickly plug, because I know I'm like kind of watching the time too. I'm like, we could talk about all this stuff for so long. But I think also to plug, I know we have early career people on here, we have leader career people. And so even if there are maybe skills that you need to brush up on or knowledge that you want to gain, I think for some people too, burnout is real. And so think about what are things that maybe you want to do that are just going to help you professionally or personally, so just a quick example for myself, like I've been a trainer, I've been a practitioner, I'm now been some kind of school psych professional for, almost like 15 years. And so that was really what prompted me to join the task board, because I was like, you know what, like I think my skills and my knowledge are pretty good, but I'm ready to give back to the field in a different way and have some kind of other type of goal. So I think it's just really important to kind of reflect on where you are and how that can maybe help in fulfillment with our role too in the field.
And I'll say for this year, my goals this year are not like something that's a skill. It's a skill deficit that I've identified as setting boundaries. And like, here's a big one that I think a lot of us struggle with is learning how to say no. I have a hard time saying no. It's basically a doormat. Like, so you can just ask me and I'll just do it. But, being able to set up and kind of create, whether it's a checklist in your mind, especially with the saying no part, that you just kind of run through whenever somebody requests something, right? So let's just go back to that example of like classroom management stuff. Like, let's say you just don't have time. So somebody's like, I need you to come in, I need you to help me out with this classroom, or can you give me some pointers? Go through a checklist in your mind. Is what's the relationship between myself and this person, right? If I ever talked to this person before, no, then why? Like, there has to be some type of give and take. The next part is what I'm going to do going to take up a lot of my time, right? Does this outweigh the other things I need to do? I have 13 assessments that are due within the next month. They want me to come sit in their room for the entire morning. Is that how I need to better utilize my time? And then also being able to have the skills, the soft skills, we'll say it again, to say no in a way that doesn't break a relationship for future, right? So, I would love to, maybe I can just kind of email you some recommendations, but I really need to go pull these kids right now to do this assessment. Is it okay if I maybe check in with you real quick after school to kind of see if those recommendations will work? And maybe we can have a quick conversation then. Because the school day is only 8 hours, right? So like that's all you have to work with these children, So being able to utilize that time is super important. So I think that's just kind of things that go through your mind as you go through it. So I'm talking too much. We're only halfway through. So.
No, it's fine. No. And I think this gets into the next point. So the U is utilizing your time well and your space well. I like that you put easier said than done, right?
Yeah. Yeah, these are all theory things. These are all like pie in the sky. If I could do these all perfectly, here's how they would go. But creating a schedule or outline of your weekly and monthly tasks. So I have a list of all the reads that are coming up and when they're due. So that way I know they're coming, or reevaluations. I schedule out everything through the day, even if I know maybe I'm not going to get to it. If I do it after the fact, I know I've done it, right? So like I'm still kind of checking things off down the list. So if I know I need to test a kid from 9 to 9:45, I'm putting that on my calendar from 9 to 9:45. So that way it's blocked out. And if anybody looks at my calendar, they know I'm busy. So they can't just come barging into my room or anything like that. But it also helps me track on what I need to do for the day. I have really bad ADHD. So if I don't do that, I may forget that I need to do that. Figure out some system to track your referrals, right? Like I'm now moving to an Excel worksheet. Previously, I just kind of did it in my mind or had a paper or used like a OneDrive that we use in the district. But this Excel worksheet works very well for me, and I'm able to kind of mess with it and change things on it to make it work for me. Organize your room, so it's like an inviting place. You don't want to go to a dingy dungeon every single day if you don't decorate things. I know it sounds dumb, but if you walk in and you're like, I really enjoy my room, it makes it easier to be happy and to like be efficient. Implement little things now. We've talked about this multiple times, right? If you put in the work now, there's long-term results and ramifications that'll be great and it'll help you out down the road. And then establishing a structured workflow will help you stay organized and meet deadlines effectively, right? So if you have a goal in your mind, if you want to tie it back to the goal to have every kid tested, within the first, 30 school days of consent instead of 45, now you've built in a little bit of extra time on the back end, but you've already got that mindset of I'm going to have every kid done by 30, all right? So you've already built a routine, so that way you give yourself a little bit extra time if you need to go over. Because if you're aiming for 45 school days, what happens then when you're at 45 school days? So that's a personal one for me, is like I try to test every single kid by 30 school days. That way we're done. And if I need that extra time, I have it, but I don't tell myself. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like you're setting those boundaries for yourself and you're trying to stay accountable to those things for yourself.
Yeah. And then also being organized in your room is really important. I've learned, like, being able to know exactly where certain things are in your room and just grabbing it saves you time, instead of like trying to wade through paperwork to try to find where do I put all the tracking forms that we use in our district, or where's all my counseling materials or things like that. Like I almost have like little sections in my office where like things are, and that helps me in the long run, because I just know exactly where to go. Or if somebody needs to grab something on like another school site, it's like, hey, I'm coming by. You said I could pick up your MIGDAS kit or your ADOS or your counseling toys. Where are they? I tell you exactly where they are. So that way I don't have to like, shoot, put me on FaceTime so I can see my room and point them out exactly. So. Yeah.
And I think for people too that are on this call that maybe they are jealous that you actually have a room, because some people, you show up and, they're like, you can be in the closet today, we'll try to find you a room. But I think that some of your principles, even like organizing your computer, if you're a person that's always bouncing or you're in the car a lot, like what is your travel system? What are you taking with you so that you can get to things accessibly? How are you organizing files on your computer so that you can find stuff, more quickly? So I think that idea can extend in other ways if people, aren't lucky enough to maybe have like their own dedicated office.
And I'll say I'll come from a place of school psych privilege where I have an office on both campuses that are my offices, of varying size, but I still have a space. I don't have to compete for space or anything like that. So I do acknowledge that. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, no, I think they're good principles. And that's why, like you mentioned at the beginning, everybody's going to kind of find their own strategies and ideas based on the things that we talk about today. All right, let's move to the L. The L is linking up with your staff and your colleagues.
So this is maybe I think the most important one is just creating relationships and communication with your staff members on your campus or in your district or your colleagues in the world, or even communication with parents and guardians and things like that, right? Communication is key, because if not, things get lost in the weeds, or there's no trust that's built up between people, and then there becomes a conflict of interest on multiple different fronts, and people may feel discouraged from talking to you, or you may even feel discouraged from talking to somebody else. This goes both ways, right? This is what we're recommending, but you've all probably have an educator you've worked with before who's very stonewalled, or doesn't communicate very effectively, or comes off rude or whatever. And you're like, well, I'm just not going to go talk to them. I don't want to deal with them, or I don't feel like, whatever, we'll just deal with it at the yard or at the meeting. But if you open up these pipelines to people, this makes this communication a lot easier to happen, because I can have a real conversation with somebody about maybe a disagreement or a discussion or a student, and I don't feel uncomfortable, like, all right, I hear what you're saying, but look at it from my perspective, right? And also just kind of helps with building relationships down the road, like little things like there's teachers slowly coming in now, they're setting up their classrooms in our district. Like, I'll go help move furniture in their room if I have time, right? Like, just helping those little things, like, it makes you somebody on campus that's also seen as a leader and somebody that they can go to, like, those are the two things, and your voice will be heard at that point, right? Like, when you build those relationships, people trust you and what you know and your knowledge. I feel like a lot of times school psychs will go by on a campus and people don't actually know what we do, but having these relationships allows you to talk about things and maybe like, oh, I didn't know Chris knew about that. I didn't know Elise knew that stuff. Like, that's great. I didn't know I could use them as a resource for this. So this, again, it's all these things, is a giant ripple effect with all these things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I tell my students a lot, I get it, because it's our job is hard. It takes a lot of time. We're busy, and so I feel like those things are the quickest to go, but even things like take a lunch break, you know what I mean? Like, go sit in the teacher's lounge and like talk to people, even if you scarf down your lunch in 15 minutes, but like, don't just sit in your office, like, so much of what we do is that interaction and collaboration. So you choosing to get out of your office and go sit in the teacher's lounge and eat for 15 minutes will pay dividends, in the end. It's a lot easier to deal with things when you've collaborated and you have those relationships. And I feel like sometimes we get in that mindset of like, well, that's 15 minutes that I could have done XYZ, right? But those people skills are really important.
They are. They really are.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, let's talk about
And so real quick, I'm looking at the chat from Cole Davis, like having them attend meetings and help with monitoring. I think that's, again, you're becoming visible on a campus. Yeah, that's great.
Absolutely.
This next one, because we're kind of short on time, this one's more of one of those fact ones we're talking about. Just know it's new or pending. Familiarize yourself with like policies and regulations that govern our profession. These are new House bills and Senate bills. This is when you guys get these slides, when you click on other recent updates, it'll actually take you to the page that has a bunch of updated, bills that are either talked about or passed recently. This is the Texas version of it. The Texas Association of School Board. So when you get a chance, go and look at that. But basically on this one, just familiarize yourself with things that may have changed recently, because they might not all affect you, but they actually may affect you directly. So I don't know. Is there anything else you really want to talk about on this one, Elise? So I want to prioritize some of the later ones.
No, and sorry, I lost the slide and I'm like trying to get back.
All right, then I'll tap dance for a little bit. But I think those are important, right? Because if you don't understand these things, you may be doing something wrong with a new legislation or law or bill that's recently been passed. While Dr. Hendrick is pulling it up, I'll move on to the next one and she'll just bring it up when we get there. But the next one is safe space for you. Prioritize your own self-care, maintain your well-being. Your social and emotional health is incredibly important. Setting boundaries, practicing stress management techniques, engaging in activities to recharge, like do whatever is necessary to rejuvenate yourself. Remember that like taking care of yourself enables you to become better at what you do. So you just need to find whatever that is, so that way you can be effective going forward. Sometimes it's just relaxing. Sometimes just going home and reading a book, whatever, playing board games. I'm a huge board game person. So like those types of things are so effective in keeping you sane throughout the school year.
Absolutely. Sorry, I like that's what happens when I start clicking stuff. Then it's like other things go off the screen and other things go on. So I apologize. That's technology. Can you talk about that? I know that this is the last S in the acronym, but talk a little bit about, because I mean, I know you personally, obviously. So I know for a fact that you do not take work home. And
Absolutely
I
not.
know that for our field, that is a huge issue. And I do acknowledge the fact, like you said, that you probably work a little bit in like school psych privilege, right? Like you have a lot of school psychs in your district. And so some people might be experiencing more shortage than others, right? But talk to us a little bit about, I guess, how you make that happen and what goes into your day for you to be able to save that space at the end of the day for yourself and your family.
So the biggest thing is when I get home, so this is my mindset. This is Christopher Ponce's opinion, not anybody else's opinion. But what I wanted to make sure is that when I got home, I had time to focus on my family and what I want to do to help create a safe space for me, whether it's rejuvenating myself or whatever. I also don't, I know. So also asterisk, I'm in a doctoral program. I have to work from home now, but that's just a thing that happens. But I didn't want my children to always see me like typing up reports, or my wife to see me typing up reports or whatever. Whenever I'm at home, I want to be there for them. So that was a personal thing I always told myself. Now, because I wanted to do that, that means I had to be efficient during the school day. You know, I can't, it's not a give and take. It's not like I just, fart around all day and then go home and just do that again. Like that makes it so when I'm there at school for those 8 hours, I'm doing things for 8 hours. I'm not just sitting in my room and talking on the phone or going and hanging out with teachers in the room. Like whenever I set my schedule for that day, pending any type of fire I need to put out, like that is what I'm doing. From 9 to 9:45, I'm testing. From 10 to 10:30, I'm doing counseling. From 10:45 to 11:30, I'm testing. Right, little things like that, report writing, all that type of stuff. I use the middle of the day to report write because that's when like lunches are happening. It's all the weird scheduling. I'm in an elementary campus, mind you. So like I just have to make sure my day is set out to a T. So that way I can make sure I utilize every single minute of that day. Because I don't want to take work home. I don't want to do that. That's just a personal choice that I've made for myself and a boundary that I've set for myself. My work, now if I have to stay later at work, I have to stay later at work, but I'm not going to take the work home.
Yeah,
That's
no,
just,
thanks
like I
for
said, it's
sharing
just
that.
something, but I've also had 9 years of practice of it, right? Like, so I've done it for 9 years now where I've told myself, sorry, 8 years, where I've told myself, I'm just not going to do that.
Yeah, but I think you bring up a good point that I think for everybody, that's probably an individual process a little bit. Like you almost have to do some self-reflection on, if I am taking a lot of work home, is that a systems problem?
Yeah.
Is that an individual problem? Like I know for myself, I'm a trainer, so my work is a little bit different, but I get bogged down by emails. Like, and when you answer an email, then that person answers you right back. And then I answer them right back. And it's like, I'm just having email conversations all day long, right? So I've reflected on that. And I've said this year, I'm only going to check my email at certain periods of the day because I can't get bogged down into that. So I think that I just share that example to tell people, you probably have to do a little bit of reflection on, if there are issues in your day where you are getting bogged down with things, how you can set up a system that works for you so that you can be more efficient.
Yeah, and maybe it just starts off by trying like you just set your schedule for the day. Like just do it and just try to stick to your schedule and see if that, I know, like I said, I know what we do for a living. I know that's not always, that's easier said than done, right? But just take a day where you're like, all right, I hope no chaos happens today. And I'm just going to set my schedule and see how efficient you can be on that day. And then do it the next day.
Yeah.
And then do it the next, like, don't set up a week schedule, do it day by day, right? Think of it like behavior. You have to shape yourself to get to that point. like I said, it took me 8 years to get to this point where I become incredibly efficient throughout the day. So
Yeah.
you just have to, you have to work on yourself. You
Yeah.
really.
I agree. So Carmen asked in the chat, she said that she loves how you set up your day and that you maybe helped her organize her day. So she was wondering if you could share a visual later, like either through us, or I know we have your Instagram handle at the end, like just to give people a visual of what that looks like.
I can do that. I'll have to go in and, declassify it. So, but yeah, I can share something like that.
Okay, awesome. Thanks. Because I think that is really important and where we struggle. I know we have like 7 minutes. So I guess talk to us a little bit about, your takeaways. We've covered a lot of things, right? So if you were trying to motivate everybody to get it to have a great year, we want everybody to have a great year. I guess your parting words and thoughts.
Just know your worth. Know what you are. You're a damn school psychologist. This is a hard job that not many people get to do. I mean, there's also a shortage, so that's also like a double thing. But just know that you are efficient and you're a very specialized individual, right? We have a beautiful community of school psychologists, or we should have one, that hype each other up and get each other going. And just know that on a campus, you're a leader. You should be a sped leader. You should be a campus leader, because you have a very unique set of skills that nobody else has. And you get to talk and deal with things that nobody else gets to do that. But you also get to do that for a reason, because you're licensed and you're worth it. Remember your why, right? We just know all that stuff,
Yeah.
So I'm trying to keep it short just for questions.
No, I get it. And I think the why is important, because I will admit, and I think everybody on this call will admit, like there are days in our job that are hard, right? Like, I
Yes.
mean, you leave and you're just like a little bit defeated. And so remembering that why, setting those goals, and like you said, I liked how you said shaping behavior, like we're not going to be perfect every single day, but thinking about the things that we want to work on, that we want to improve on, whether that's ourselves, our systems, I think that just helps us.
And don't be like another, okay, this is me speaking again, right? Do what you want. It's your job. But like, don't just be another face at the campus. Like, you deserve a seat at the table too. You're entitled to certain things. Advocate for yourself as a school psychologist. Like, you are there for a reason. You are the mental health professional on a campus. Advocate for that. Let people know what you can do, and get your seat.
Absolutely. Completely agree. This is how people can contact you. I know that you're open to questions, ideas. If you are not on social media, you should be. For some, I mean, some people are averse, but there are really good things on social media. Chris posts a lot of stuff on his Instagram, ideas, just videos of himself talking about fun stuff. So if you are able and want to, jump on social media and follow him, and like he said, the visual, we can make sure to get that to everybody as well. Do you want to share anything else, Chris, about that?
Yeah, just if you have questions, comments, corrective feedback, you can email me as well. I'm not giving you guys my phone number. Sorry about it. But you can email me or, message me on social media stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Somebody asked, Leanne, yes, we will make sure to get you access to these slides. And if you do have colleagues that are not able to join us today, this is being recorded. And so we typically put that on our TASP YouTube site. If you did not know, TASP has a YouTube site. So you can share this with people in your district, if they weren't able to be here, because it does just have a lot of good little tips and tricks to get everybody settled and thinking for the new school year. I'm looking in the chat to see if we had any other questions that didn't get answered. Yeah, great for interns. I think we covered anything, but if you have other questions, Chris is super open to answering things. I'm happy to answer anything too, but we will make sure to have these slides and everything posted for you. All right, we have 3 minutes to wrap up. So number one, Chris, thank you so much for sharing your time, your energy. I told Chris
for the day, so I made sure to block it out.
Yeah,
So,
thank you. There you go. Your schedule, right? But I told Chris behind the scenes, I'm lucky in that I have people that help me, and we've kind of conceptualized this shortage series, but Chris is so positive and energizing about our field. And I think that that's something that we really need as we get started for a new school year. So we really appreciate you, Chris.